odd events, weird historical figures, conspiracy theories, and even cryptids. All of these are on the Oddities Iceberg. If something is weird and relatively unknown, it could be on here. This is the Oddities Iceberg by Bolshevikisland and Woolrich. It covers general oddities throughout history, and is still being added onto. It has a total of 10 tiers on it, with tier 1 being one of the shorter ones on the iceberg. Obviously, I won't be covering all of this iceberg in one video. This video will only be covering tier 1 of the iceberg. Realistically, later on in the series, especially with the longer tiers, I will split them up into 2 parts. So if you don't want to miss future tiers, make sure to subscribe. Now, onto the iceberg. To start us off, we have a pretty well-known one. The Dancing Plague, or Dancing Epidemic, occurred in 1518 and lasted about 3 months. The plague affected 50 to 400 people and caused those affected to break out into a sporadic dance until he collapsed or just dropped dead. When a physician came onto the scene, he said the best cure would be for them to, get this, to dance themselves free of it. This would then lead to the guild halls in the towns affected by the plague to facilitate it, and they would even supply those affected with a stage and musicians. As you could guess, this backfired and only led to the plague spreading faster. So all the musicians were removed and they ended up banning dancing and music. After a few months, the dancing died down, and those still affected were sent to a mountain shrine to be cured. The cure would entail a ritual where those who were affected go into the shrine wearing red shoes sprinkled with holy water, holding a cross and incense while reciting Latin incantations. This would work and bring an end to the dancing plague. Modern theorists believe that the dancing plague was caused by mass hysteria or some kind of food poisoning. Either way, it's definitely one of the weirdest stories to come out of medieval times and a cool footnote in history. Now, some of you may remember this one. I, for one, was too young to be overly existential, so I didn't get to be involved in this one. The 2012 phenomenon was the belief that some massive event would take place at the end of 2012. Whether that be the end of the world, the rapture, or even the second coming of Christ, the sky was the limit. The reason for this was because December 2012 was the end of the Mesoamerican Mayan long calendar, and because the Mayans believed in world ages, people freaked out, meaning that this literally meant the end of the world. As you can assume, because, well, we're here, they were wrong, or alternatively, maybe the rapture did happen, and everybody left on Earth is just awful. Actually, that would explain a lot of things. This one, as a matter of fact, I did live through. Okay, the situation was this, as I remember. In 2016, for some reason, there was just a massive amount of alleged killer clowns that started popping up everywhere in America. And funnily enough, I remember my own experience with this. It was in middle school, and somebody called an anonymous clown threat. And when school got out for the day, there were like 20 cops outside the school escorting us to our buses. And like, thanks, I guess, but I feel that was kind of a waste of the police force for what was probably a high school prank call. Anyways, this was a weird thing that happened, and while researching the topic, I did find something pretty funny. There were plans for an alleged clown purge on October 25th, which to be honest is just very funny conceptually. But nothing came out of this except for the demise of the entire clown industry. The 23 Enigma is the belief that the number 23 has some sort of hidden power or significance, and it has been seen in many books and movies, such as The Illuminatus, Trilogy, or Principia Discordia. Another thing mentioned in the article linked is icocitrophobia, which is the fear of the number 23. Some people take this a bit further and believe that the number 23 has some higher evil power and can be used for certain rituals, to summon some entities such as demons, or even Satan in some cases. Albassa is known as the world's skinniest building, and has a pretty funny urban myth around it. The story is as such. There were allegedly 2 brothers, and they had a father who died. When he died, he left 2 plots of land. Brother 1 got plot 1, which was very large, and brother 2 kinda got screwed over and got plot 2, which was very small and was cut mostly off by the road. Because of this, plot 1 was significantly bigger than plot 2. As a result, brother 2 felt like he got rightfully screwed over. So he decided when his brother built a building on plot 1, he would build a building on plot 2 to block off the seaside view he would have, therefore lowering the rental value of the property. And this led to the creation of Albassa, the world's skinniest building. At its widest, the building measures a measly 14 feet, and at its thinnest, it measures about 2 feet. Pretty funny story, and I hope it's true, because this man's pettiness is absolutely phenomenal, and we shall strive to achieve it. Okay, we all know at least some information on this one, right? We all know the story. Amelia Earhart was going to be the first woman to circumnavigate the world, but sometime during this trip, we lost contact with her plane and her body or plane was never found. Like, we all know that, right? But there are some weird theories about this one. The most famous one is that she just crashed and her plane's at the bottom of the sea somewhere. Another interesting one is that they actually landed successfully on Garter Island and starved. But a really interesting one that I don't personally believe but go off is that she was captured by Japanese forces. But regardless, all those are just theories, and there have been no for sure conclusion on the death of Amelia Earhart. Alright, for this one, I'm just gonna level with you. I'm just gonna read the article because I'm not smart enough to explain this one in my own words. The Banach-Tarski paradox is a theorem in set theoretic geometry, which states the following. Given a solid ball in three-dimensional space, there exists a decomposition of the ball into a finite number of disjoint subsets, which can then be put back together in a different way to yield two identical copies of the original ball. But this would be impossible, making it a paradox. Caine's Jawbone is a murder mystery puzzle written by Edward Marthers, who used the pseudonym Turkumata. This book is 100 pages long, but the gimmick is that the pages are actually out of order. The reader is tasked using all the clues in the pages to solve the murder as well as find out the murderer's name. The pages can be arranged in 9.33 times 10 to the 157th power different ways, and the correct way has never been revealed. Allegedly, only 4 people have ever solved it, and if you check on Amazon, it's pretty cheap, so if you have a couple months to spare, hey, this would be a pretty fun side hobby. Okay, so I think we can all agree that the royal families back in medieval times were incredibly inbred. One of the prime examples of all this inbreeding is King Charles II, who lived from 1661 to 1700. He was born with extreme physical deformities, but despite this, he was actually a pretty decent ruler. He didn't ruin the Spanish Empire or anything. The ones to do that would be his successors, who couldn't settle on who would inherit what territories in the empire, and this would lead to internal wars breaking out. Overall, there's not much more to go over with this one. He's just a pretty interesting guy with a lot of deformities. Another pretty popular one, Cicada 3301 is an anonymous organization who want to look for smart code breakers and such to offer them maybe a job. We don't know for sure. To do this, they put out a series of puzzles that start as a 4chan post, where the anonymous user would challenge the users of 4chan to a scavenger hunt. That would be way too lengthy to describe in this video. I will link a video that I strongly advise you to check out if this at all sounds interesting to you. Only a few people have ever solved the puzzle, and people who finished the first puzzle were allegedly asked questions on their thoughts about several topics, such as information freedom, online privacy and freedom, and rejection of censorship. There have been a few puzzles by Cicada, and currently, one of them is still unsolved, so maybe it's worth giving that one a look. Who knows, maybe you can solve it. The crystal skulls are allegedly pre-Columbian Mesoamerican artifacts that should have been possible to be made with the tools they had available at the time. Realistically, the explanation is that the skulls were made in Germany in the mid-19th century, specifically the workshops in the town of Idar Oberstein, which was famous for making objects out of imported Brazilian quartz in the mid-19th century. As you might have guessed, the myth that these skulls were some ancient artifact was popularized by Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So let it be known that these skulls are probably not ancient artifacts or alien skulls, and they most likely do not have mystical powers. The CSX 8888 incident took place on May 15th, 2001, in Ohio of all places, and was one of 36 runaway train incidents in all of recorded history, this being one of the longest lasting ones, lasting just under 2 hours. The train moved at speeds as high as 51 miles per hour or 82 kilometers per hour, and fun fact, this train is still in service today, using modern parts so hopefully something like this doesn't happen again. The train was caught when another train caught to the runaway and coupled them together, which is when the front and the back of the train sort of Lego themselves together. This allowed the back train to slow the first train down, putting an end to one of the most Looney Tunes stories in American history. Another well-known one, the D.B. Cooper hijacking. This happened 51 years ago at the time of this video, and the case remains unsolved. What happened is on November 24th, 1971, during a Northwest Orient flight heading from Portland to Washington, a hijacker told a flight attendant that he had a bomb and demanded $200,000 of ransom. That'd be $1,400,000 in today's money. And when they landed in Seattle, he released all the passengers and demanded 4 parachutes, presumably to take a hostage. When he got the money, he instructed the flight crew to refuel the plane and begin a flight to Mexico City. 30 minutes after takeoff, the man opened the plane's aft doors, deployed the staircase, and parachuted off the plane into the night. The man was never found or identified. The man during the flight would call himself Dan Cooper, and that's where we get the name DB Cooper. It is the only case of air piracy to remain unsolved. In 2016, the FBI just took the loss and allocated all the funds into the investigation into other investigations. Diogenes is commonly known as the father of cynics and invented cynicism. He also did not give a about anything. There is very little actual facts about Diogenes. We only know the myths, and there are quite a few. This man was a character. He walked so all of the depressed teens today could run. Diogenes would live in a clay wine jar on the side of the road and would often get sick because of the weather. His only other possession was a wooden bowl which he drank out of. But he would destroy this wooden bowl after seeing a young bear drinking from his hands from a puddle. During this, he would proclaim, "Fool that I am to have been carrying superfluous baggage all this time. What a Chad!" One more funny little anecdote is that he would regularly urinate on passerbys and defecate in the local theater. He would also give the middle finger to anybody who looked at him during these acts. Once again, what a Chad. The Donner Party was a group of American pioneers who migrated to California from the Midwest, but due to many mistakes they would have to spend the winter of 1846 to 47 snowbound in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. But at some point in their stay, they ran out of food and some of them resorted to cannibalism, eating the bodies of those who died from starvation, sickness, or extreme cold. And in one case, a Native American guide that accompanied them was killed just to be eaten. At the end of the incident, only 48 of the original 87 members survived. The Dyatlov Pass incident, which happened between the 1st and 2nd of February 1959, and still is a mystery. What happened is that in the middle of the night, an experienced group of trekkers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, for whatever reason, they ran to the wilderness away from their campsite in the middle of the night, while they were completely underdressed for the heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures. This resulted in all of the researchers' deaths. The bodies had substantial trauma inflicted upon them, including major and minor skull damage, cracked teeth, severe chest trauma, missing eyes, one missing tongue, and one body was just missing their eyebrows for whatever reason. And the situation gets stranger. The tent was cut from the inside to escape, so they clearly left in a hurry. And what did the Russian government chalk this all up to? Well, they said, and I quote, "This was the result of being under the influence of a compelling natural force." Now, what does this mean? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But I don't buy it. Their injuries are just so strange. I mean, major and minor skull damage could happen, but how the hell do you lose a tongue or your eyebrows? And there was no trace of an avalanche at their site, so I don't think it was that. Anyways, I don't know. This entire situation is just really weird and nothing seems to line up. Let me know your theories in the comments. The elephant's foot is a massive pile of corium that formed during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. It is likely the most radioactive object that humans have ever accidentally caused to be formed, and is still extremely radioactive. It is located under the remains of Reactor 4, and at its most radioactive, the elephant's foot could deliver a lethal dose of radiation in just a few minutes. And since then, the elephant's foot has become much less radioactive due to decay. The Euthanasia Coaster is a hypothetical roller coaster designed to kill the passengers as a form of euthanasia. It is purely hypothetical, but a scale model was made in 2010. Not much more of this one, but it does pop up sometimes in media and fiction. This, as the name implies, is a theory that the Earth is not in fact a globe, but is indeed a flat surface. Despite the vast amount of knowledge to support the theory, such as and there are some globers, as we in the community call them, who still believe in the completely ridiculous globe theory. Like, look at this image. This is clearly photoshopped. All joking aside, this theory is hilariously incorrect, and despite that, there are still groups of people who still believe this theory. I guess you can find a group for anything nowadays, no matter how stupid. Yeah? Now this one is strange. I had no idea about this beforehand. Apparently, during a massive economic boom, the Chinese government thought there was going to be a massive increase in the population, causing them to build some cities in a bit of a rush. This led to these cities being incredibly underpopulated, and some neighborhoods just completely empty. Pretty spooky looking. Also, the Chinese government seems to be lying about the population living in these areas. In one story, the government just lied and said that about 30,000 people lived in a neighborhood, and all the shops and the schools in the area are closed. And guess what? Nobody lives there. It's a really strange situation overall. It does look pretty cool though. The Ghost of Kyiv is a nickname given to the mythical MiG-29 Fulcrum flying ace that is credited with shooting down 6 Russian planes over Kyiv on February 24, 2022. The Ghost of Kyiv is unfortunately just a myth and a propaganda tactic used to unite the Ukrainians against the Russians. The Ukrainian government confirmed this in April of 2022. Despite this, some people today, and even some news outlets, still think that the Ghost of Kyiv is a real thing and blindly report on it. The Giant's Causeway is an area consisting of over 40,000 interlocking basalt columns in Northern Ireland. The columns were caused by an ancient volcanic fissure eruption and is considered a World Heritage Site and nature reserve. The name comes from a legend that says that the causeway was built by Fionn Mac Cumhaill, a giant, so he could fight a Scottish giant Benedonner. He built the causeway so that the two of them could meet and fight. This entry is really just an interesting land formation with some folklore behind it. Gloomy Sunday is also known as the Hungarian Suicide Song and was composed and published in 1933. The song's lyrics are about how the protagonist wants to commit suicide after his lover dies. Legend has it that many people, especially Hungarians, have committed suicide while listening to the song. In the 1930s, the press reported that at least 100 suicides were associated with the song. Although these deaths were greatly exacerbated and were more likely related to the famine and poverty at the time, it didn't stop the media from stringing the story that this song had some sort of mystical properties, or maybe even some subliminal messaging behind it. Another little note is that the composer killed himself 35 years after writing it, so... The Gombe Chimpanzee War is, as you can guess, a war between chimpanzees. The war lasted 4 years, from 1974 to 1978, and was between two groups of chimpanzees in the Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania. The war was as such. The two groups were once unified in the Cicada group, but over the span of 8 months, researchers noted that the group would divide and tensions would grow until 9 adults and their kids would separate from the main group, and they would then move to the southern area of the park and were rebranded as the Kahama group. Over the 4-year war, all of the male in the Kahama group were killed and essentially caused the downfall of the group. The Cicada group, after the victory, would attempt to expand their territory, but were repelled by another rival chimpanzee group. Rasputin was a Russian mystic and was a very close friend of Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia. He had a large influence in the last few years of the Russian Empire. He had many controversies in his life, accused of heresy and rape. There was also a rumor that he was sleeping with the Tsar's wife. There were 2 assassination attempts on him, one an attempted assassination and one successful assassination. Duh. During the first assassination attempt, he was stabbed in the stomach, but he successfully recovered from that. In the second successful assassination, he was lured to a house and was shot twice in the head. There are pictures of his body online, but they are a bit gruesome, so search for them at your own risk. Now, I gotta admit, I've never seen this pool before. I actually mistook it for another pool that scarred me as a young child. If you recognize what's playing right now, you understand, and I'm sorry for bringing up those memories. It is located in the Shinjuku district of Tokyo and was used for porn, and a lot of it. So much, in fact, that became unanimously known as that pool in internet subculture. If I hate to bust your fun, I should rephrase that. I hate to spoil your immersion. Yeah, that works. This pool is no longer in service now, at least not for porn. The company that owns the pool had to raise the price drastically because of the cleaning cost it would take after the shoot was done. It is still used for photo shoots though, so if you're in the area, you could rent out this place for your next photo shoot and get like 5 comments mentioning it. Heaven's Gate was a cult founded in 1997. The group's original belief was that a UFO would come down to take them to ascend to the next level. What does this mean? I'm not sure. This was until the original leader of the cult would die of cancer. This event would cause the cult's beliefs to change just a little bit. They would now preach that the human body was a container for the soul, and that this container would be opened after death. This belief would come to a head on March 26, 1997, when the San Diego police found the bodies of 39 members of Heaven's Gate. They had committed ritualistic suicide when the comet Hale-Bopp was the closest it would be to Earth. Before the bodies were discovered, the cult would update their website to say, Hale-Bopp brings closure to Heaven's Gate. Our 22 years of classroom here on planet Earth is finally coming to a conclusion. Graduation from human evolutionary level. We are happily prepared to leave this world and go with T's crew. Okay, a less serious topic now. Hubert was and still has the world record for the longest personal name ever used. His name has been the subject of some minor controversy because people constantly misspell it and mispronounce it, like I'm probably about to do now. I will now attempt to recite Adolph's full legal name. I will do this all in one take. Here is the timestamp. Skip to this point in the video if you do not want to see me suffer through this. Adolph's full legal name is Adolph Blaine Charles David Earl Frederick Geralt Hubert Irvin John Kenneth Lloyd Martin Nero Oliver Paul Quincy Randolph Sherman Thomas Uncas Victor William Xerxes Yancey Zeus Wolfenschlagenstein Hassenberger Dorfin Welsh Evorel Turn Wavergewissen Haft Schaffers, Wassenschaft Warren, Wolgenfleisch und Sorgfaltigenkeit beschützen vor Angriff an Dorici Herabiger Feinde Welsh Evorel Tons 1200 saßen Dach Resvor an der Scheißen Wander stier dem Mensch der Arm Scheifgen Aschit Mithun sein und Seiben Idri Diem Melchet Rishmotter Skepachlichtas ein Nussprung Vankraft Gestat sein Lange Fachscheißwist Henstach nas die Gamesfust Suschenach Baslaft Don Döstern, welche gehabten Wachbab Leinsen Christian Dreschheich Schund Wohinder näher Asavon wer Standegemens Schlichen kein Ton Tefortplaffen Nons Sichfrin non lebenslang Funden nundre Hemit nicht in Verchurchtwunsch if and wo ander intelligent Gestrop Fusvon Hischwein Weisven Stir Natigram Senior. The Illuminati is the name for a secret organization that has been given to many secret organizations throughout history and media. The original Illuminati was formed in 1776 in Bavaria, Germany. This group's goal was to, and I quote, oppose superstition, obscurantist, religious influence over public life, and abuses of state power. They'd be suppressed in Bavaria, and all the modern-day secret societies labeled as Illuminati are thought to be continuing the idea of the original Illuminati, and claim to be direct descendants of the original Illuminati. But realistically, they probably are not directly related. Although the Illuminati has gained some significant attention in pop culture for being almost an umbrella term / name for when somebody has a secret society they need a name for, of course, we can't discuss discuss the Illuminati without discussing the elephant in the room, the conspiracy theories. Of course, there are people who believe that the Illuminati survived their suppression in Bavaria, and they think that the Illuminati is actually controlling world events from the shadows, and they are actually responsible for a lot of important historical events. They believe that many people in Hollywood or in office are members of the Illuminati. These claims are probably false and have little to no evidence to back them up, but it is fun to imagine. Also, some good memes came out of the theories. Jack the Ripper was a serial killer who would murder prostitutes in the East End of London from 1888 to 1891. He had 11 alleged victims, but only 5 of these are confirmed to be his work, and his crimes were quite infamous for being extremely gruesome. He would cut open the victim's throat and proceed to cut open their abdomens and remove their internal organs. This led many to the conclusion that Jack the Ripper had some background in medical work because of the precision of his killings. The name Jack the Ripper came from a series of letters local media organizations would receive, specifically one called the Dear Boss letter, in which the writer referred to himself as Jack the Ripper, but is now a common belief that this specific letter was actually a fake created by the reporter in order to sell more papers. Although some letters were definitely real, such as the From Hell letter, which along with it was sent with a half-preserved human kidney from one of the victims. Jack the Ripper was never caught, but this hasn't stopped some people from speculating who they might have been. The main suspect accused of being Jack was Aaron Kosminski. This was because one piece of evidence, which was a shawl found on one of the bodies, was a much higher quality than a prostitute would have had. The police would assume that this shawl was actually Jack the Ripper's, and it was found that the shawl was likely made in St. Petersburg, Russia, around where Kosminski was born, and the bloodstains found on the shawl were weird. They didn't line up with what the blood spatters would have looked like in this case. In addition to all the evidence, Kosminski was also mentally unstable and was sent to asylums numerous times for attacking people. It makes sense to me, but some people still debate the real identity of Jack the Ripper to this day online. Hey there, real quick, don't skip. If you watch this far in the video, then you probably enjoy the content, and if that's the case, why not subscribe to the channel? These videos do take a lot of time to make, and I would appreciate it. Anyways, back to the videos, bye. Jerusalem syndrome is a mental phenomena where an individual believes that they are the Messiah or some other religious figure. This sudden change is usually the result of a visit to the city of Jerusalem. It affects a lot of people of many different religions, such as Christians, Muslims, and Jews. It is most likely another case of hysteria like the dancing plague from before. There are 3 types of Jerusalem syndrome, 1 being the most obvious, and 3 being the least. A person with type 1 will believe that they are some sort of religious figure reincarnated. Type 2 is where a person becomes completely infatuated with the idea of Jerusalem and the religious connotations around it. And type 3 is where a previously normal person becomes completely psychotic after arriving in Jerusalem, causing them to believe someone is after them or trying to poison them. John Mcafee was the founder of the Mcafee antivirus program. It was the first antivirus program and was revolutionary at the time. It gave Mcafee a substantial fortune, but in 2007 to 2008, during the financial crisis, Mcafee lost most of his fortune attempting to make new companies. This would lead to him allegedly not paying his taxes. In 2020, Mcafee was arrested in Spain for alleged tax evasion. On June 23, 2022, Mcafee was found dead in his cell. He allegedly hung himself in his cell in Barcelona shortly after his extradition to the United States. He definitely was not murdered. I mean, the Justice Department said everything indicated he killed himself by hanging, and the official autopsy confirmed this. But a few things are a little strange, such as the time in 2019 when Mcafee tweeted, and I quote, "If I suicide myself, I didn't, I was whacked." And several times Mcafee said if he was ever found hanging, he did not kill himself, and he was killed. And one more thing, his lawyer, who remained in constant contact with Mcafee, stated that Mcafee showed no signs of suicidal intent. Overall, I do think he committed suicide. And he was definitely not murdered in his jail cell, and we should just trust what the government does and says. They always do what's best for us and never do anything malicious to us. Jonestown, also known as the People's Temple Agricultural Project, was a settlement in Guyana that was led by an American cult under the leadership of Him Jones. On November 18th, 918 people died, mostly at the settlement, but few of the deaths occurred at a nearby airport and another one in a building related to the cult in Georgetown. Almost all of the deaths were caused by cyanide poisoning. A lot of the people poisoned were almost certainly injected against their will, an act of what is referred to as revolutionary suicide. There were also audio tapes found in Jonestown in which Him Jones and his close followers can be heard discussing their intentions. And in these tapes, Him Jones ordered the murder of U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan. Him Jones can then be heard ordering the other 4 followers in the room to commit murder-suicide, which they would do. The details of the murders and the suicides at Jonestown are still shrouded in mystery, and a third of those killed were children. As many as 70 plus victims were injected against their will. In addition to this, the guards stationed at the entrance of Jonestown were ordered by Him Jones to shoot anybody who would attempt to escape during this. The tapes mentioned before are known as the death tapes, and can be found online. Sorry for the pronunciation in advance. The Kowloon walled city was a densely populated city in China, near Kowloon, China. It had essentially no laws. After World War II, the city attracted many refugees after the Japanese occupation of China. This led to 35,000 people living in the 6.4 acre wide area, and the Chinese government left the area essentially ungoverned, causing a massive black market to pop up in the city. They would sell almost any banned product and had very high rates for prostitution, gambling, and drug abuse. This all came to an end in 1987 when the Hong Kong government announced that they would be demolishing the city, and after a very rough eviction process, the demolition was finished in April of 1994. Lavender Town Syndrome was an urban legend / creepypasta that said that in the original version of Pokemon Red and Green, the song that would play in Lavender Town would have weird effects on kids due to them being able to hear a high-pitched frequency that would cause them to feel depressed and suicidal. Supposedly, over 200 kids committed suicide over this, but as you could guess, it's not real. Of course it's not. It's a creepypasta meant to scare dumb kids like me. Larry Walters had a dream. He had a dream of an America where no government can tell you where to go, and Larry wanted to ascend, literally. You ever see the movie Up? Well, imagine that, but instead of a house, it was a f***ing lawn chair. That's right, Larry was a f***ing mad lad, and strapped 45 weather balloons to a f***ing lawn chair, and just went for it. He ascended 16,000 feet. For reference, that's about half the height of an airplane's cruising altitude, on a fucking lawn chair. Larry's flight would last about 45 minutes until coming to an abrupt end when Larry would become entangled in power lines. Larry would safely climb back down to Earth, and funnily enough, Larry's dream would be realized as he would gather many followers who would recreate his actions. Godspeed, Larry. Rest in peace, you absolute legend. The Library of Babel is a website that is, as the name would imply, a library filled with books, containing every possible combination of 1,312,000 characters, and it technically contains every book that has or will ever be written. So technically, if you look long enough, it's in there. Look, I can look anything up in here and find it. Like, if I look up one of America's greatest heroes, I'll find him. That is the name of a town in Wales, and it has one of the longest one-word names in all of Europe, only being beaten by... Skip here if you don't want to hear this. Here is me attempting to pronounce the name of that... Tamada Wakutin Gana Koakatameta Ti Turipaka Kapiki Maga Harun Uku Pokai Wen Ua Kitana Tahu Landfair Pilgwin Gil Gogary Chiwirl Ern Drobwilanti Silogogo Gosh. Lucid dreaming is a dream where the person dreaming is constantly aware that they are dreaming. Say that 10 times fast. And they are either partially or in full control of the dream. Many people claim that one can learn to lucid dream on command, and a few people claim to have crafted entire worlds in their heads. Allegedly, lucid dreaming is more taxing on your mind than regular sleep, so it can lead to your sleep not being as effective than normal sleep. Mary Celeste was the name of an American merchant vessel that was found deserted drifting in the Atlantic Ocean in 1873. This ship was found with the lifeboat missing, but strangely enough, no major damage on the ship. Even more strange, nothing was found missing from the ship. All cargo was still aboard, and so were all the personal belongings of the crew. None of the crew had been seen or heard from since. The last entry in the captain's log was from 10 days before it was discovered, and nothing seemed amiss from the log. No other explanation, just a very strange discovery with no real conclusion. The Max Headroom Incident is an unsolved hijacking of a public TV station. It happened in 1987 on November 22nd. The news was going on as normal, and then suddenly the broadcast was interrupted by an unknown individual wearing a Max Headroom mask for 17 seconds until the broadcast could regain control. A second more interesting hijack would occur on the PBS's broadcasting of Doctor Who, and this one lasted a lot longer and was way weirder. Max Headroom could be heard making references to New Coke, a reference to a popular ad at the time, and other unrelated topics. The video would then change to Max Headroom's bare ass being spanked by a woman with the fly swatter, and he was screaming, "They're coming to get me," while the woman would say in return, "Bend over, bitch." The broadcast would then end. A very strange story, and there's no good explanation of why they did. In 2009, a plane would strike a flock of birds, causing the plane to lose all engine power shortly after takeoff. Given the situation, the two pilots on board decided that their only course of action was to glide the plane into the Hudson River, a very dangerous and risky maneuver. But it would end up being successful, and none of the passengers on board would die. Only a few of them would sustain any serious injuries. All of these events, from hanging the bird to landing the plane, took less than 4 minutes, and the event would be known as the Miracle on the Hudson, even having a movie made about it in 2016. MKUltra was a well-known illegal experiment conducted by the CIA. It lasted for 20 years, starting in 1953 and ending in 1973. The goal of the operation was to find a drug that could be used on people to make them more susceptible to interrogation. In other words, they wanted to develop a truth serum. The CIA would use many methods to achieve this, such as giving the unsuspecting victims drugs and chemicals without their knowledge or consent, such as LSD or meth. They'd also use electroshock therapy, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse. Another fucked up fact about MKUltra is that they would not only do these experiments to US citizens, but Canadian citizens as well. They did this through a scientist called Donald M. Carwin, who would work at a research institute in Montreal. The CIA would pay him $69,000, over $500,000 today, to conduct these experiments. The problem was that the CIA knew that this would be very bad if it got back to them, so they paid Donald through a CIA front organization, and Donald had no idea this research was for the CIA. The US would also set up secret detention camps with the direct purpose of capturing suspected spies and experimenting on them, without the risk of criminal prosecution. But they didn't just capture suspected spies, they also captured anybody they deemed as expendable. They would be tortured for years in an attempt to find a truth serum. But when Watergate happened, the CIA director at the time ordered that all of MKUltra documents would be destroyed, and most of them were. This would make an actual investigation into MKUltra impossible, if it weren't for a cache of 20,000 documents being misplaced in a financial reports record. After all these discoveries, there was a full-on investigation into the CIA, and some of the details of MKUltra were revealed to the public. And despite all of this, no one was ever officially punished for MKUltra, and the public still doesn't know most of the details. Keep in mind, only a small number of documents actually survived that initial destroying, and we only know the stuff that they actually told us about. I can only imagine how much worse the experiments got that they aren't telling us about. The Monty Hall problem is named after the host of Let's Make a Deal, and it is a brain teaser disguised as a probability problem. It goes as such: there are 3 doors. Behind one door is bacon, unlimited bacon, but no games. Behind the second door is games, unlimited games, but no more games. But really, there are 3 doors. Behind one door is a car. If you guess the door with the car, you get to keep the car. Good. Behind the other 2 doors are goats. Now, let's say you pick a door. Alright. Now, let's say you pick door number 1. I now open door number 3. You see that there's a goat behind door number 3. Now, do you change your answer of which door you chose? That's the entire question. The general idea is that switching the door you chose has a 2 out of 3 chance of working, while same with the door you initially chose has a 1 in 3 chance of working. My Immortal is a piece of Harry Potter fanfiction that was written in 2006 and 7. It was released on fanfiction.net and has become iconic on the internet just because of how bad and insane it is. It is full of grammatical and spelling errors. The story follows the protagonist named, and I quote, Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway, a goth vampire who attends Hogwarts and is in love with Draco Malfoy. Personally, I've only read up to the 2nd chapter and I couldn't continue because me and my friends were laughing too hard. The author allegedly stated that the fanfiction was a work of satire and not to be taken seriously, conspiracy, but I don't know. There's so much work put into this for a bit that I think they're just embarrassed about it. But to be honest, if it was me writing it, it's so funny and unapologetically goth and dark for a fanfiction, and I can just imagine this hormone-filled teenager writing this multi-chapter work in their dark room written by candlelight. Like, if I wrote this, I would own it. Alright. The Nazca Lines are geoliths in the soil of the Nazca Desert, located in South Peru. They are thought to have been created between 500 BC and 580. As of today, we have found hundreds of these, and archaeologists believe that there are still some undiscovered. Some of the patterns seen in these lines are extremely complex, and have led people to speculate that these lines were not, in fact, made by humans, but instead by extraterrestrial entities. Either way you look at it, the Nazca Lines are incredibly impressive if they were made by humans, and shows the vast amount of knowledge they must have had over the surrounding land. Number stations are radio stations that will occasionally read off numbers. The popular theory is that these numbers are meant to be heard by intelligence officers in foreign countries. In most cases, the numbers are read via speech synthesis, but there have been cases where other methods were used, such as Morse code. These stations popped up in the beginning of World War I and have been seen ever since then. Some of them have patterns and some of them don't, but not much else is known about them. Oak Island is a privately owned island in Lunenburg Country in Nova Scotia, Canada, and some theories believe that there is buried treasure on the island. Specifically, the treasure of the pirate Captain Kidd. There are many oddities on the island, such as the location known as the Money Pit, which is a shaft more than 100 feet deep that was found by some teenagers who found a weird looking dent in the ground, and when they dug down, they found a man-made shaft with wooden platforms hanging down. Another strange occurrence happening right now is at a location called Smith's Cove. Multiple objects not native to the island have been washing up there, and archaeologists have found objects such as a 15th century lead cross and many wooden earthworks. This is an urban legend that believes that Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by a lookalike. The rumor is that in 1966, Paul died in a car crash and the Beatles, for whatever reason, decided to replace him with a lookalike, and they would leave clues in their songs and album covers. Yeah, personally I don't believe this one. Phineas Gage was an American railroad worker who was well known for defying death. During his job, he was using a tamping iron and looked directly into the hole he was tamping down. Unfortunately for him, the gunpowder he was pushing down suddenly went off and the tamping iron went directly through his skull. This, as you could guess, destroyed a lot of his brain, mainly his left frontal lobe. But surprisingly, he would live for another 12 years after the incident, although he would never really be the same because according to friends and family, his personality changed. They would describe him as no longer Gage. As I mentioned before, Gage would live for 12 years after this and would find work as a sideshow attraction telling the story of his accident. His story would actually become a large part in neurology, being labeled as one of the great medical curiosities of all time. Gage would die May 8th, 1860 of a seizure. The Roanoke Colony was an attempt to found the first permanent settlement in North America. Founded in 1585, almost nothing is known about what happened to the colonists. All of them simply disappeared without a trace. People would come to discover that they all disappeared in 1590, only 5 years after they settled. It would seem that all 112 colonists just disappeared off the face of the planet. Many believe that the Roanoke Colony was massacred by the Native Americans that lived in the area. A more hopeful look is that they were actually assimilated into the tribe, but no real evidence has been found to support these theories. Robert Wadlow is the largest human in all of recorded history. Standing at a moderate 8'11", Robert's size was due to a hypertrophy on his pituitary gland, causing him to produce much more human growth hormone than normal. Robert would die at 22 due to an infection on his ankle. He claimed the record as the world's tallest man just 1 year before his death, growing over 3 inches in height in the last year of his life. Hey there, I'm gonna put this one before the actual entry because this one is theoretically extremely dangerous to you. You could be tortured for all of eternity if this is true, and you know about it. So if you don't want to know about it, leave to this timestamp. Alright, that's your warning. On to the entry. Rocco's Basilisk is a well-known thought experiment that was conceived in 2010, and it reads as such. A sufficiently powerful AI agent would have an incentive to torture anyone who imagined the agent but didn't work to bring the agent into existence. This will imply that me just telling you about Rocco's Basilisk has made that you now have to make a decision. Will you or will you not bring this agent into existence? And it doesn't even matter if you say one thing, because your subconscious could have an entirely different opinion. So essentially, I just doomed anybody watching this video. Sorry about that. This thought experiment has allegedly caused people to have mental breakdowns over the prospect of unending torture. The smiley face killer is the theory that a string of deaths that occurred from the 90s to the 2010s were not in fact simple deaths, but were instead the victims of one or more serial killers. This is because at most of these scenes, where the victims allegedly drowned, there was a graffiti of a smiley face. And 1 or 2 times of this happening could be seen as coincidence, but there were dozens of cases where these smiley faces showed up. But then again, smiley faces are a pretty common graffiti symbol, so this is likely just all coincidence. The Somerton Man is an unknown male whose body washed up on the beach of Somerton Park in South Australia. What makes this case strange is that in the man's pocket was a piece of paper that read, "is finished," when translated. The scrap paper came from a copy of, I'm going to butcher this, but of Rubaiyats of Omar Khayyam, and after digging around, the police would find the book that the scrap originally came from. And when they found this book, it just got weirder. Inside the book, somebody written a local phone number, another unknown number, and a passage that resembled a coded message. The passage has still not been deciphered in any good way that satisfies the case. Another strange factor is that we still don't know what caused the man's death. The biggest theory is that he was a spy and he died of some kind of undetectable poison. Recently, in 2022, we may have finally identified the man though. The man they think he might have been is Carl Charles Webb, but that still doesn't explain why a lot of this man's belongings have the name Caine written on them. Spontaneous human combustion is exactly what it sounds like. A human catching fire without any source of ignition or fuel. There has allegedly been over 30 cases of SHC in recorded history, and while a few of them have very plausible explanations, some of the deaths are still listed as unknown. But one very strange commonality between some of the cases of SHC is that a large portion of those listed as SHC victims are elderly women. St. Elmo's fire is a weather phenomenon in which luminoplasma is discharged from a rod-like object, such as a chimney, animal horn, or mast of a ship. This is a recreatable event, as a matter of fact, and is commonly seen by pilots of cutting-edge airplanes. In nature, this phenomenon can signal that a lightning strike is imminent, but sailors back in the day would regard this phenomena as a sign of good luck. We all know what Stonehenge looks like, okay? It's a collection of large stones arranged in a circular pattern. We have no records of the culture that made Stonehenge, and have no clue of how it was built or why. This led many to believe that Stonehenge was constructed by extraterrestrials or something of that nature. Stonehenge is still a mystery to historians today, and many theories exist for what its intended purpose was. Some say it's religious, but we really don't have a concrete answer. Tank Man is the name given to an unknown Chinese protester who stopped a column of tanks from leaving Tiananmen Square after the Chinese government murdered hundreds of protesters in the Tiananmen Square massacre. The actions of the man were filmed and distributed worldwide. Although this is considered one of the most influential images of all time, nothing is known about what happened to Tank Man, or the people who were piloting the tanks that day. Okay, at this point, we all know the Backrooms, right? But if you don't, the Backrooms is another internet urban legend / creepypasta that originated on 4chan and post that reads, "If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless backgrounds of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." The post was accompanied with this now iconic image depicting of what the Backrooms looked like. The Backrooms, since the post was made, has now spiraled into an image far beyond what anybody could have expected. Hundreds of people have come together to make this creepypasta into something more, with extensive lore, games, and even multiple online video series depicting others' takes on the Backrooms. I think it's really wholesome that this entire community came about because of a 4chan post. The most mysterious song on the internet is the name given to the song that the internet has been trying to find the creators of for years at this point. The song was likely composed in the 80s, but despite the ongoing efforts, the original band has never been found. The Vasa is the name of a Swedish warship built between 1626 and 1628. Although this might have been one of the most expensive warships ever made at the time, the ship sank only 1,400 yards into its first voyage, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. After all the bronze cans were salvaged from the ship, it fell into relative obscurity. Until the 1950s, when it was located again in Stockholm Harbor, where the ship was salvaged with a mostly intact hull. The ship is now permanently on display in the Vasa Museum in the Royal National Park City. The Waco Siege, or Waco Massacre, was a siege by the US government on a religious compound belonging to the Branch Davidians cult and occurred between February 28th and April 19th, 1933. The raid occurred because the ATF suspected that the cult was stockpiling legal weapons. After the ATF obtained search warrants for the search and arrest of many cult members, the ATF planned a sudden daylight raid of the ranch to serve the cult. Their plan was to arrest all of the individuals before they had time to react and get the weapons and explosives. Unfortunately, luck was not on their side. They decided to inform one reporter from KWTX-TV about the raid in advance to get some proper news coverage, but this reporter was allegedly very bad with directions and decided to ask a mailman for directions to the compound. Unfortunately, this mailman was the brother-in-law of the cult leader David Koresh. The mailman would rush back to the compound to inform them of the upcoming raid, and as a result, the cult was fully prepared for the raid, with hundreds of guns and explosives at their disposal. The attempt to serve the warrant obviously failed, and 4 ATF members and 6 Branch Davidians were killed as a result, so the FBI decided to step in and attempt to seize, which would last a total of 51 days until April 19th, where the FBI would launch a tear gas attack to try and force the cult out of the compound. But for whatever reason, the compound started to catch fire. The seize and the fire resulted in the total deaths of 4 federal agents, 82 Branch Deviant members, 25 of which were children. In these deaths was the cult leader David Koresh. The fire has been the main cause of concern. Many people believe that the FBI intentionally started the fire, while the FBI claims that the cult started the fire intentionally. They also claim that there's no way that the FBI could have started the fire. Overall, I don't know, I could see either side of the argument. I think it was possible that the Branch Deviants could have lasted longer if they wanted to, but on the other hand, it is clear that they were fighting a losing battle, so it could have been anyone. That being said, after reading some of the things the government has done on this list, I would not be surprised the FBI was responsible for this. The Troxler effect is kind of hard to explain, so while I do, I'll put a few examples on screen of the Troxler effect. The effect is this. If you focus on the dot or X in the middle of your screen, you should see some wacky stuff happening, such as seeing things appear or disappear. The Winchester Mystery House is a mansion in California. It was once owned by Sarah Winchester, the wife of the founder of the Winchester Rifle Company. After her and her husband's deaths, rumor began that the house was still haunted by spirits, and is considered as one of the most haunted places in the world. Sarah Winchester was rumored to have heavily associated with the dead, throwing parties and seances in the house. The design of the house is very odd, with doors and windows that open to nothing, and tourists and guides have reported signs and signs of hauntings, such as cold spots, footsteps, cooking smells, odd sounds, whispering, doors and windows slamming, and a feeling of being watched. Now, realistically, this place is not haunted. Architects have stated that a lot of the more odd features of the house were installed after Sarah's death, so most likely this place was remodeled after Sarah's death as a tourist attraction. Y2K was the theory that because the year 2000 would be displayed as 2 zeros on computers, and in most places, it would be indistinguishable from the year 1900, and people speculated that because of this, many catastrophic events could happen in computer systems around the world, such as radios not working. People assumed the worst and assumed that planes could follow the sky, and that nukes would be launched automatically because of the malfunction, and humanity would essentially be thrown back into the Dark Ages or worse. But the worst that happened was that some code was screwed up for a few weeks until they were fixed. But there were some cases where some governments freaked out over Y2K, spending millions if not billions on trying to fix the alleged problems. For example, Canada ordered that all of their important cabinet members stayed in the capital in one location. They also had 13,000 troops on standby, just in case. Overall, it's estimated that $300 billion was spent in preparation of Y2K, and about half that was by the US. And our final entry on the list is the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is an unidentified serial killer whose crimes were committed in North Carolina in the late 1960s. The Zodiac Killer claimed to have killed 37 people, but only 5 victims have ever been confirmed. He would target mainly young couples, and on one occasion he killed a male cab driver. The Zodiac Killer is well known for taunting law enforcement by sending taunting letters to news organizations who he threatened for publication, and leaving messages at the crime scene. In the letters he sent, he would taunt the police by releasing information of the crime that they didn't release yet, including how he did it, and occasionally he includes ciphers in these letters, 2 of which remain unsolved today. The only suspect the police have identified publicly was Arthur Lane Allen, who was a former elementary school teacher and sex offender. Well, that is tier 1 of the iceberg. This is by far the longest video I've ever made, and I will continue working this iceberg in the future, but tell me in the comments if you prefer these longer videos or if I should put out the future tiers in multiple smaller parts. Thanks for watching, bye.